Hey guys, my name is Wendy and today my group and I will talk about case study number 2 entitled The Micromanager. This case follows two main characters, one, manager George, and two, employee Shelley. Besides being a family man, our character George is also a CEO. The company he is working for is currently trying to sell a software engineering firm known as Retronics. Retronics was started in the 1990s in Silicon Valley, California. At first, it was receiving great reviews and generous funding from investors. But when the dot-com bubble burst, so did Retronics. By 2003, the founder was fired and George found himself as the new CEO. 16 months after his hire, sales were just not good enough to draw the attention of investors that Retronics needed. In order to combat this problem, the board's chairman had hired a new recruit named Shelley. She was the new marketing director. The chairman had seen her work at a trade show and was impressed with what she had done. Although George was not happy with the hire, he knew he had to do best with what he had. He brought Shelley in to sit in on meetings, conference calls, and even asked the CFO to explain the company's cash flow to her. He believed that if she was up to date with the company's standings, she would make good decisions to help the company move forward. However, even after all the meetings and phone calls, George still seemed to question her judgment at times. He didn't understand why she was working the way she was. Did she have a personal problem against him? Did she have problems of her own in general, or was it something else? Currently, Shelley is working on a press release draft that will hopefully help Retronics propel forward. But George does not seem to understand why she is not putting her best effort into it. First off, the title is not strong enough. The article has a couple of mistakes, and the overall quality was just not up to par with what George had wanted. He felt that he had to spoon-feed her everything and basically do her job for her. What was she not understanding? This press release had to be perfect, or else Retronics, along with George and Shelley, will be out of a job. On the other hand, Shelley believes that all the work she has done for the company was to the best of her ability. She doesn't understand why George has to concern himself with the little things like the title of her article. I mean, it was just a working title anyways. To release her pent-up anger towards her boss George, Shelley likes to call her former boss to rant about how horrible her days have been. This job was supposed to be a good stepping stone for her future, but now she feels trapped. Every day she feels as though George is breathing down her neck, haunting the hallways, butting into conversations, and at times, he even directs the subordinate's attention away from her and onto himself. George also insists that Shelley write up 2 press release reports every single month, even when there is nothing to report on. She couldn't stand being treated like a child anymore. Something had to be done. But what? There are a couple of ways to tell whether someone is a micromanager or micromanages. Symptoms of a micromanager include someone who monitors and assesses every step to a project. Instead of focusing on moving their company forward, a micromanager will instead focus and nitpick at the little details of a project, ensuring everything is done their way. Another symptom of a micromanager is someone who will get irritated or mad easily when a subordinate will make a decision without consulting them, even if this decision is completely and totally within the subordinate's level of authority. The reasoning for this is that micromanagers are often scared when things aren't going their way. A third symptom of a micromanager is something called reportomania, which means that they will request for unnecessary and overly detailed reports. Micromanagers usually focus excessively on procedural trivial details rather than overall performance, quality, and results. Because of this focus on trivial details, it causes delays in decisions, clouds overall goals and objectives, and restricts the flow of information between employees. The following video is another example of how a micromanager might act in the workplace.
Hey Brad, how's it coming? Great.
Settled in okay?
Yeah, I'll settle in.
Just had a couple of changes to the report you handed in there. Could you open a folder on your desktop there? Just some procedural things. I understand there's a learning curve and you're new here. We like to have all headings bolded and italicized. And we only use Helvetica font here. Keeps things light and informal. No serifs, no problem. Little saying we have. And could you actually sit up straight in your chair? We have another saying here, bad posture is generally considered to be inferior to good posture, BPIGCTBITGP. Just remember the word bapigsit-bitjipa.
Bapigsit-pitjipa.
Bapigsit-bitjipa.
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 Good. One more thing I need to show you. Could you open the January spreadsheet there?
Sure.
When you answer in the affirmative, instead of saying sure, could you please say yeah with a sharp inward gasp?
Yeah?
Yeah.
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 Good. Keeps things consistent with everyone else. You don't want to stick out as the new guy, eh?
No.
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 No. No. No.
Now, I do notice you have the top button of your shirt undone, so I'm just going to get this for you. Okay. Just going to tighten your tie. I'm just going to kind of keep tightening. You're going to lose consciousness temporarily.
As seen from the video, a micromanager can be a real pain at work. There's no doubt that Shelly from Redtronics can relate to this. Let's take a look at the problems that we have found in the case. The main problem in this case is the lack of trust between George and Shelly. Not only does George not trust Shelly's judgment, he's also second-guessing Shelly's capabilities. He does this by constantly looking over her work and walking her through her job. Shelly, on the other hand, lacks the trust in George in that she feels uncomfortable speaking to him. At one point in the case, Shelly considers calling in sick because she did not want to deal with George's nitpicking. Regardless, throughout the case, we are able to identify 3 subproblems that have risen because of this lack of trust between George and Shelly. It is important for managers to figure out their management style. This plays a crucial role in any business, as management is usually the role model for everyone below. In this case, the lack of trust stems directly from George's management style. George, the CEO, was always too preoccupied with worrying about all the little functions of the company. His hand-holding with Shelly and other employees implied that he's not only doing his job as CEO, but a part of everyone else's job as well. The following quote is evidence that George is too involved in the small parts of the business when he should be worrying about bigger things. From a conversation between Shelly and Rich, kind of a mixed blessing, isn't it? She ventured. When George takes an interest, he could be pretty hands-on. Pretty hands-on isn't the beginning of it, laughed Rich. He's elbow deep in the stuff. A second quote, from a conversation between Shelly and Laura, her former boss. He haunted the hallways and got into conversations with her staff, sometimes getting them off track by signaling what he thought was important. George's management style is attributed to his engineering background that calls for the attention for detail. This style also reveals his inability to adapt to the larger picture, as he is going around giving his input in everyone else's work. This becomes a problem when the company's progress slows to a stop. Overall, George's management style is tying up too much of his time by making him worry about his employees' work, preventing him from making necessary changes. Building respect is an important part of trust. It is crucial for managers to have faith in their subordinates' judgment and work, despite the importance of its success. In the case, we're in a situation that deals with a lack of faith in Shelly's discretion in her current projects. As a result, George is consistently looking over Shelly's work to look for ways to improve by adding his own take on the matter. Essentially, George is using his experience as a measure of how good Shelly's work is. In the following quote, George expresses his opinion in Shelly after he has tried to bring her up to speed on the entire business. He even asked the CFO to explain the cash flow statement situation to her, but he still found many of her decisions a bit off target. She was a solid project manager, but that direct mail campaign she launched, or the format of the seminar Retronics hosted, not how he would have done it. This quote explains a lot about the relationship between George and Shelley in his eyes. George belittles Shelley's work, even though he's not the one with the marketing degree. This lack of respect in Shelley's background really takes a blow to her ego and disrupts her work, as seen in the following quote. In a conversation with Laura and Shelley, okay, a few things I admit I got wrong, but on most of it, I think my instincts have been good. I don't know the business like he does, but he should give me credit for being a better marketer. He's an engineer, for Pete's sake. As a result of George's editing of Shelley's work, a conflict arises that eventually hinders Retronics of its true potential. Conflicts arise when subordinates don't speak up about ongoing problems. This is especially present in the case considering George has the ability. In this case, Shelley speaks to a third party about the situation, rather than speaking directly to the source of the problem. In the following conversation, Laura, the third party, suggests that Shelley should speak up as well. From the conversation between Shelley and Laura, I'm sure George is under a lot of pressure, Laura offered. Maybe he's unloading some of that on you. I'm tempted to say you should tell him to back off and let you do your job. He might respect that. This example has real-world applications. Oftentimes, a problem goes unnoticed as employees tend to keep what's bothering them from their boss. This gives off the impression that there is a closed atmosphere which prevents smooth communication between crucial employees. The only way to really resolve this would be to speak up about it, and that is what eventually happens in the case.
The first possible solution is developing trust. George needs to trust his employees, especially Shelley, since she was selected by the chairman. Shelley has proven herself constantly with the projects that she has already accomplished and the positive results of the projects. George has to stop looking for mistakes in her work. He should let Shelley know that with responsibility comes accountability. So if she does make a mistake, she should be held accountable for it. The same respect should be given to his other employees as well. If George trusts his employees, they are likely to trust him back. Gaining his employees' trust will increase the quality of work they produce. In the story, Shelley didn't trust George to a point where she wanted to call off from work because George is constantly nitpicking for mistakes in her work. The second possible solution is to have monthly evaluations submitted unanimously in a box where George will have a chance to read it. George's employees can drop off the evaluations anytime throughout the month, and at the end of each month, George will read all the evaluations. Based on the evaluations, George will try to improve his management style. For example, if there's a consistency of complaints that he is setting unrealistic sales goals, George will look over the goals he set and see if he can readjust the numbers. The third possible solution is for Shelley to stand up to George and let him know that because he is constantly breathing down her neck and looking over her shoulders, she is under additional pressure, which causes her to make careless mistakes. If he was to give her some space, the quality of her work is likely to improve. The last possible solution we discussed was for Shelley to talk to a third party, someone like the HR. She will explain her problem to HR and ask them for recommendations and suggestions on what she should do. She will also request that HR talk to George directly to try and resolve this problem.
Among previously mentioned solutions, we came to the conclusion that the first solution would work the best based on the circumstances given. As the CEO of the company, George needs to focus on the big picture and figure out strategies to move the company forward. And it is also important that he empowers his employees to perform their jobs. This can be done by establishing trust with his employees. Since George is questioning Shelley's ability to perform, we believe that George should let her work on a major project to prove herself and evaluate her performance afterwards. By doing this, Shelley will be held accountable for her work and she will take it more seriously. It shows how he trusts her on the project, which will then establish a sense of accountability. It will also let Shelly be more creative with her work because she doesn't have any strict guidelines to follow. George should let her know that although he's not checking up on her every hour, he will evaluate her based on her performance afterwards. We also believe that the company should set up a systematic way of reporting progress. Based on Shelly's interaction with George, it would have been much better if they were in a more formal setting when they were talking about Shelly's work. George should set up regular meetings with Shelly and her team to discuss the progress instead of constantly asking her. This way, George would show more respect for Shelly and the rest of the team would have better understanding of their jobs. During the meeting with Shelly and her team, George can not only learn about the progress of the marketing department, but will also have the options to give his input. Whether they use the input or not is up to the department. This way, if George has an important point to make, he can do so, but Shelly has a final say in it. We believe that the most important part of all is George's attitude. His employees will see how it implements these measures and will emulate his behaviors and attitudes. His interactions with managers like Shelly will trickle down the company's hierarchy and it will certainly influence the company's performance.